Today's G7 summit in France. He's battled with Canada's Justin Trudeau and the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, over trade restrictions. He's announced plans to leave the summit early to get to Singapore for his meeting with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Now the president says the G7 ought to reinstate Russia into the group after a 4-year hiatus, arguing that it's better to have Russia at the negotiating table rather than away from it. This is, of course, causing all the howling you would expect from the usual Washington people. David Tafuri advised Barack Obama's campaign on foreign policy, and he joins us tonight. David, it sounds like something liberals used to say during the Cold War. It's better to be at the table talking than not to be. Why is that not true now?
That's absolutely still true, but this was a strange platform for Trump to make this comment at the G7 summit. As you noted, he's gotten in arguments and squabbles with two of our closest allies, Canada and France, but then his one statement of support is for Russia, who is not there. Also of interest, he didn't say why he wants Russia to be there. Is there some trade deal he wants to do with the other G7 countries and Russia, or a security
well,
deal?
I haven't spoken to him about this, but here's a guess. We're very close to an actual war with Russia. We're fighting a war with Russia, as you know, in Syria. We've killed hundreds of Russians in Syria. And you could very easily see a war breaking out there. You could see a war breaking out over Ukraine. You could see problems in Georgia. I mean, we're as close to conflict with Russia as we've been in a long time. Why wouldn't you want to diffuse that a little bit? Is there an advantage to going to war with Russia?
Well, I'm glad you pointed that out, and I agree with you about that. But then you have to remember, why was Russia kicked out of the G8 in the first place in 2014? Because it annexed Crimea and violated Ukraine's sovereignty. Right. It's continuing in that effort by supporting a bloody war in eastern Ukraine. So that was a punishment to Russia. What Trump is suggesting is now taking away that punishment, and he doesn't even acknowledge that Russia is continuing the actions that we were intending to discourage by kicking them out of the G8 in the first place.
Okay, but I mean, if the point is to make a moral statement about how Putin is bad, worse than Stalin, liberals defended Stalin for 40 years, and now, you know, Putin's worse than him somehow, we've made the statement. I mean, why wouldn't you want to do everything you could to diffuse armed conflict with a nuclear-armed Russia? But liberals want conflict with the nuclear-armed Russia. Why?
Well, there has to be a carrot and a stick approach. So part of the stick approach, so punishing Russia, was kicking them out of the G8. It's also putting sanctions in place on Russia. Now remember, we do have sanctions on Russia, but Trump got dragged kicking and screaming into doing the sanctions. He didn't want to do it. Republicans in Congress wanted to do it. Democrats in Congress wanted to do it. People in his own administration pushed for it.
I mean, because I think it's idiotic, actually. But to just really quickly explain, why is Russia a greater and more imminent threat to us than Mexico? Are they killing tens of thousands of Americans with fentanyl? Have they flooded our country with 20 million illegal aliens?
Well, Russia.
No, seriously, why are they a bigger threat to us than
Russia? They are a bigger threat to us because they're trying to interfere in our democracy. Going back to the January 2017
report
because
Mexico
from our intel agencies,
people to invade our country, and a lot of them are trying to vote. And now people are saying that they need to be naturalized and allowed to vote. Speaking of affecting our democracy, nothing affects democracy more than demographic change. So Russia's still a bigger threat than Mexico, because why?
These are different types of threats. There are people that come from Mexico, and some of the illegal immigration is a threat to the U.S., and the drug cartels in Mexico are a threat. But the Mexican government is not a threat. The Mexican government's policies are not a threat. Whereas Putin, who is an authoritarian dictator, who's doing everything he can to stop the American influence around the world, to stop America's support for democracies around the world, and to protect our own democracy. He's a threat to all of those things, which it used to be all Americans agreed that was important.
Yeah,
on both sides of the aisle.
Americans have lost faith in the idea it's our job to spread democracy because our repeated attempts to do so didn't work and resulted in the rise of ISIS. So people are kind of rethinking that. Let me ask you this, though. Since Russia is the most evil place ever, and Putin obviously is Lord Satan himself, what do you make of the fact that Alex Ovechkin, a hero here in Washington, won the Stanley Cup for the Caps last night in Vegas? You were at the game. Is a friend of Putin's and a promoter of Putin's in the United States. Should we put him in jail? I mean, I know he won the Stanley Cup, but he's friends with Putin. Should we incarcerate him?
Of course we should not incarcerate him. As you mentioned, I was lucky enough to be at the game in Vegas. It was amazing. That's an incredibly tough place for an opponent to play in the Vegas stadium, and the Capitals did it.
Maybe the Russians hacked the game. Has it occurred to you?
No, Ovechkin is a big part of it. Ovechkin is the team leader. He scored a goal in the second period that was magnificent, so he deserves credit for that. Now, he has a friendship with Putin going back 10 years.
But doesn't that mean he should be in jail?
Of course,
he's
doesn't
like
mean
the
he should be in
Carter
jail.
Page of hockey.
It doesn't mean he should be in jail. He's not interfering in our election. Thank God. He's winning Stanley Cup.
For the record,
for
I
our
love
capital city.
Ovechkin. I could care less if he's friends with Putin.
Well, the point is, it's okay. It's okay for him to be friends with Putin, but he shouldn't be supporting Putin's policies because he's here in America. We love him for his contributions to America, not for his support for
David
Putin.
Teferi, a hardened Caps fan.